Good morning, Nicholas.
Welcome to QIC. Delighted to see you.
Thank you for
Would
having
you like
us
to
in the
come
studio.
through?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
Very well, I should say. Thank you.
You have a beautiful office here, actually.
Well,
It's quite spacious, right?
well, it's an investment organisation, so
Well,
we have to
yeah,
have the right kind of environment. The investment landscape here is quite favourable. Kazakhstan has a lot of favourable advantages. Kazakhstan has a fantastic agriculture opportunity. But what we're trying to do is obviously we're attracting money both domestically, so from the budget, from the state, but also from international investors. But really to try and support businesses here that are operating in the real economy. All foreign investors want any marketplace to be as easy as possible. There's still some work to do.
Welcome to the Astana Times YouTube channel. I'm your host, Asel Stubaldna, and today we are in the office of the Kazakhstan Investment Corporation, and our guest tonight is Nicholas Page, an independent director of QSC. Nicholas, thank you very much for having us today in the office.
Thank you very much for inviting me to talk to you.
Before we dive into our discussion about investments and other agenda topics, I want to ask you, what has been your experience with Kazakhstan so far?
I first had the opportunity to visit Kazakhstan back in 2012 actually, and the majority of my early experience with Kazakhstan was when I was with a previous employer, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I was very actively involved in a series of the bank restructuring activities, which I think most of your viewers are probably familiar with, those that have happened. And it was a very interesting introduction to Kazakhstan because obviously you're right at the heart of activity in the economy when you're talking to banks and looking at the restructuring. So that was it really, and through that I came to meet many people here and really enjoyed the working environment.
I see. And now I want to move on to the activities and essence of the work of the QSC. The official website states that QSC is a fund of private equity funds created to promote the growth and development of the national economy of Kazakhstan. Could you please tell us how exactly does QSC do that?
Sure. So, as a fund of private equity funds, what we're trying to do is achieve a series of different objectives, one of which is to mobilise capital so that it can be invested in the real economy in a complementary manner to the way in which the government is more generally investing money in big industries, and in a complementary manner to the way in which private sector is investing. Private equity is obviously a very specific form of sort of investment activity. And it's what we're trying to do with a fund of private equity funds is balance international experience. So we place money with international investors who also invest back into Kazakhstan, as well as deploy money into captive investment firms that we control. And again, that money is invested into businesses here in Kazakhstan.
How does QSC balance attracting these foreign capital, but also taking into account that local businesses and private businesses benefit from those investments?
Well, what we're trying to do is obviously we're attracting money both domestically, so from the budget, from the state, but also from international investors. But our money is substantially invested here in Kazakhstan in real businesses. And we invest either directly or through the funds that we're investing through. In equity or fixed income or debt-like instruments, but really to try and support businesses here that are operating in the real economy that are, deserve that capital so that they can grow and flourish. And I think that if you compare Kazakhstan to much more developed economies, what you'll see is that the level of private equity investment in this economy is still very, very low. And I think one of the reasons why QIC exists and is doing this is because we want to promote the growth of this industry, this mechanism, this private equity mechanism, so that the private sector can expand alongside us so that eventually we're not even needed. But that's really a long way down the road, I think, at this stage. What we want to do is promote that form of activity, provide an easy mechanism for international investors to invest into Kazakhstan, and then through the expertise of the investment teams here, invest into businesses locally here in Kazakhstan.
And what are some of the concrete measures that the fund is doing to promote this private equity, like you mentioned just now?
Well, what we're trying to do is make sure that we are monitoring the marketplace in terms of, identifying sort of business opportunities where it makes sense. So there are areas of the economy that need further investment. The government would like to see the economy grow. The government would like to see the economy much more diversified, and the government would also like the economy to be much greener, carbon neutral by 2060. In order to achieve those objectives, it's not just simply the government doing everything. Industry has to do some things for itself as well. And so what we are trying to do is make sure that we're backing industries that need that sort of boost, that growth. We've invested in an airport, we've invested in logistics, we've invested in food processing, we're invested in renewable energy, we're investing in healthcare, in technology. So we're investing in many different areas of the economy where we see there's businesses and managers that have got good business plans and sort of really propositions that we think are very deserving of support and will deliver growth.
And can you share with us an estimated volume of investment portfolio that the fund operates?
Oh gosh, that's a very good question. We're in a process at the moment of reviewing our sort of strategy, and I think at the moment what you'll see is the volume of money that we have now and the volume of money that we'll have in the future will be sort of many times greater, I think, at the moment. We're in the process, I think, over the last few years with all the different events of we've got one or two funds which are end of life, and we've got one or two sort of new funds. So difficult to give you an exact number at the moment, but I think it will be many times bigger in the future.
We know that the Kazakh government is making its best effort to increase the investment appeal of the country, to increase investment attractiveness. How would you assess the current investment landscape in Kazakhstan?
I think the investment landscape here is quite favourable. I mean, obviously, Kazakhstan has an investment-grade international credit rating. Your actual level of debt to GDP is low on an international level. It's sort of in the range of, 23% or so. Internationally, many countries have 100%. So there's a lot of sort of capacity, let's say, for further debt to be issued. But I think Kazakhstan has a lot of favourable advantages. Obviously, you've got a very rich mineral and oil and gas sort of reserves. There's opportunity to invest in those industries so that they can become a stronger export industry. But also, Kazakhstan has a fantastic agriculture opportunity. With places like Astana Hub, you're investing very actively in the technology industries. So I think it's a very favourable landscape for foreign investors. And the mission of an organisation like QIC is to make sure that we are partnering with organisations that really want to invest in particular areas of industry, to bring their expertise and share that with the businesses here.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think are some of the most significant challenges that foreign investors face here in the country? And could you share also with us how QIC helps address those issues?
All foreign investors want any marketplace to be as easy as possible. They have this sort of wish list of political stability, predictable legal system, easy to understand tax system. So these are all the things that, obviously everybody likes. I would say at the moment it's sort of very clear that Kazakhstan all of those areas are progressing in the right direction. There's clearly in every country lots of work that can always be done to improve things. And I think there's a lot of work that has been done, but there's still some work to do. As we look at the situation now, obviously we've had a few difficult years. COVID has been a problem, some political disruption here, obviously the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, all of which colour people's perspectives of investing in any marketplace. But I think what I'm beginning to see and hear here is a much more proactive stance around outbound presentation of Kazakhstan to the international markets, be that in the United States, the Middle East, Asia, and actually it's very evident as well that we're starting to see many more visitors, business visitors, from the Middle East and from Asia. So I think the government are definitely doing taking the right actions at the moment to move things forwards.
Since you mentioned geopolitical developments, and we are sure that they certainly affect the businesses, the economy, how do you think the recent geopolitical developments shape the investment landscape here in Kazakhstan? Did they either hinder or maybe brought attention to Kazakhstan as an investment destination?
I think there's sort of two sides to that. On the one hand, I think it creates an opportunity for Kazakhstan, clearly. And I think in many respects that's a positive. But the other side of this coin, of course, is that there are certain parts of the world that we might be a little bit more cautious. And I think we are seeing that particularly, with perhaps some of the more Western investors. which is why I think at the moment the market is likely to be more attractive to investors coming from the Middle East or Asia.
Can you elaborate what are the strategic priorities of QSC for the next 5 years and how do they align with broader economic goals of Kazakhstan?
Reflecting on the broad economic sort of objectives, I think that are out there in terms of rapidly increasing the size of the economy, diversification of the economy, and carbon neutrality. I think there's a number of things that QIC are doing. We want to continue to invest in those sort of growth opportunities. And in order to explore that, we are in the process at the moment of thinking about new areas of strategic focus for future funds. We are on an active campaign to approach and attract inbound investment into the country so that we have both domestic and international money to deploy. We're very active in thinking about the technology sector, and we've established a subsidiary business, B Global Ventures, which is focusing very much on the technology industry and the venture capital marketplace, another area of sort of growth opportunity. And we've adopted ESG principles very widely within QIC and sustainability, and we have sustainability reporting, and we're embedding that across all of our business. And I hope that across all of those different things, we're able to sort of demonstrate that our actions are very consistent with the broader government objective, but also those are actions which will make Kazakhstan and QIC attractive to international investors.
Now you mentioned several important issues that I want to touch upon in my following questions. One of them is venture capital development. Could you explain to us what is the essence of venture capital and why it is important for the country's economic development?
Venture capital is a very sort of specific industry, like many industries, and what we're trying to do in that area is support early stage businesses, often entrepreneurs with ideas, innovative new ideas. And here in Kazakhstan, you're very fortunate in having the Astana Hub, and they run some very good accelerator programs. The challenge, though, is if you may have entrepreneurs who've got a great business idea and a great business proposition, but they obviously need capital to develop it, and the venture capital industry is there to support that. At the moment in Kazakhstan, what you've got is a reasonable number of very early stage investors, but what's really missing in the marketplace is that sort of capital to support the scale up. It's all very well getting the business going, but you still need capital to make it bigger. So what we're trying to do as B Global Ventures is firstly provide education programs to founders about what it's like to create a business and attract money and run that business successfully. But also what we're doing is we are anticipating that we will also become an investor into that marketplace to try and help fill some of those sort of gaps in the funding marketplace. Not because we want to replace the private sector, that's not our objective at all, but is to be a leader so that others can then join in and also expand that sort of availability of capital to that marketplace.
Sustainability is also an important part of the mission of QSC, and you also mentioned the ESG standards. Could you share with us how does QSC incorporate those ESG standards in its activities and in the project that it implements?
Absolutely. As QIC, we've signed up to the UN PRI and the UN Global Compact and a variety of other sort of internationally recognised sustainability standards and requirements. But what we're doing is we're looking at the corporation itself and its subsidiaries and saying, how can we operate in a manner which is more sustainable, which is greener? How do we use energy? How do we sort of make sure that we don't have wastage in the organisation? We are also looking at our sort of policies. We've got, I think our gender balance is 57% female, 43% male, but we're looking at how we're giving women, appropriate opportunities. And in fact, in B Global Ventures, in some of the VC boot camps that we've run, we are offering free of charge places to female founders of businesses. So we really want to support, the S and the sort of the gender within everything. But in our sort of core business, which is investing money, we clearly think about ESG in the context of the strategy. Are we investing in businesses which are green and sustainable or which have a pathway to continuous improvement? How do we monitor their ESG performance? We don't just ask them at the beginning and the end. We want to be doing that all the way through in the same way that we gather financial information. And obviously in our reporting, so we issue a sustainability report, and we're going to be doing a lot more of that as we go forwards to make it very clear to everybody here in Kazakhstan, the policies that we're pursuing.
Could you share with us what are some of the metrics or, let's say, benchmark that QSC uses to assess the real impact and success of its investments?
We examine the success of our investments really on sort of two broad dimensions, really. The first is obviously we look at the financial metric, which is if we invest money, we obviously would like to get that money back and a little bit more. So we want a profit. I'm not saying we necessarily want quite the same level of sort of profitability that some of the operators in the broader market want, but we would like to see a positive return from our investment activity. On the other side of it, what we're also trying to do is think about those sort of sustainability and sort of ESG dimension as well. And we want to see that organisations are reducing their energy emissions. They're using greener energy in the future. They are putting in place and living up to policies they put in place around gender and around workers' rights, etc., etc. So we're measuring things on two dimensions, both financial and also those sort of non-financial measures. And I think as we move forwards, those non-financial measures will continue to be more and more important. And reflecting on the international marketplace, if you look in the world of global private equity or banking or throughout the world, these are definitely something that are getting a lot more attention, both when private equity firms make investments, how they monitor the investments, and when they sell the investments to the next future owner of the business.
So working in Kazakhstan, I think you must be following the reform agenda of the country's leadership, of the country's government. So my next question, with your vast experience in international finance, how would you assess the economic reforms that the government is undertaking so far?
I'm not an expert on sort of the areas of economic reforms, but I can reflect on what I am seeing in the work that I am doing here with QIC and the discussions that I have with people in the marketplace. And I think sort of consistently I'm feeling that at the moment the government is very clear in terms of how it wants to see things move forwards. It wants to improve the standard of living for everybody. It wants to improve GDP per capita. And it's mindful that as that happens, there's going to need to be a diversification in the economy to provide the services and everything that the population here needs. So I feel at the moment that it's good. I'm sort of positive about the direction. But like every country, it's not static. There's always something that needs to change. But I feel at the moment that the actions that the government are taking are continuing to make Kazakhstan appear to be a good place to think about investing money.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, for this conversation. That's all my questions.
Thank you.